Hello and welcome to Surveyor Says, the podcast from the National Society of Professional Surveyors. Each week, we bring you fascinating guests that are involved in the profession of surveying. We cover a lot of ground, including Table A Talk with Gary Kent, Point of Order with the NSPS Joint Government Affairs Team, Future Focus, highlighting current and future leaders of the profession, and everything survey-related in between. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast, and hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Surveyor Says.
Welcome to Surveyor Says. This is your host, Curt Sumner, today. Thank you for joining us. The new ALTA NSPS standards have now been in effect about 4 months, I suppose, somewhere in that area. And so I thought it would be a good idea to visit with our resident expert, Mr. Gary Kent, and he will probably tell us that not one question has been asked at this point in time. But then again, we know that's not true because the questions always begin even before they're actually official. Correct, Gary?
Yes, they do. I normally give my first program on new standards probably in about October, like 5 months ahead of time, right after they're adopted. And the questions start right away. And my list of new suggestions for what will now be presumably 2026. I already have, I'm looking at it right now, 2.5 pages of suggestions for next time around.
It's very interesting to me as we've gone through this through the years. Probably you and I as much as anybody, and at least from the NSPS side. And Paul Byrne and some of our other folks have been involved too, but we've been around it a really long time. And it always, I don't know why it is, but it's a little bit surprising to me when we begin to get questions instantaneously, and they never stop through the entire period of time where that particular version is in force.
It's kind of it is kind of uncanny that we get a lot of questions early on, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think we get any more questions today than we will in 3 years from now. And it's interesting. I'm always happy to have questions, although as you know, Curt, sometimes we're seeing a question and my initial thought is, really?
Yeah, but if you think about it from the other perspective, though, if I'm practicing and maybe I don't get hired to do an ALTA NSPS survey for some period of time between when they go into effect and the next time that we look at them. So it does make sense in a way that you get those questions, because oftentimes they'll come from people like I was saying, maybe I just didn't have any of those jobs at that particular point in time. But I think we also get them from people who do them routinely. I mean, there are companies that pretty much focus on them.
Yeah, it's very true. A lot of times I will get questions, and you do too. I haven't done many of these, and so I have this question. And it's perfectly fine. And with my earlier comment, I didn't mean to criticize anybody, because we want questions. We like questions. It helps us, among other things. We may say, like my earlier comment, really? But, if we get that question 3 or 4 times, we may think it's patently clear. But if we get the same question 3 or 4 times, I usually make a note about it that apparently we need to look at it because it must not be clear. And there are, I do also appreciate the comments from people like you say that do hundreds of these, because they're always thinking about things, and they're more likely to have not just a question but a suggestion as to what if you said it this way, because what we see in the many surveys we do, we see this consistently arising. So we like questions from all comers, that's for sure.
And I know we had a conversation not too long ago with our cohorts over at ALTA, and we were talking about where we are in the whole process right now. And I guess sometimes as surveyors, we don't think too much about questions coming from the other side, but they do. And I think that's something that's important for us to understand, is that it's not just us that have questions.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I have I'm looking right now at a suggestion for next time from an attorney, and his comment that the essence was, it sure would help residential, buyers or owners, just your normal property owner who is not familiar with survey issues, if the standards required that the surveyor kind of red flag things that that sort of person should be aware of. And that came from an attorney, and I totally understand it. It concerns me a little bit when the burden gets put on the surveyor to identify things that may be wrong, and we normally can do that, but there are things that we might not recognize, or that an attorney would say, that right there could be a problem, and we might not realize it. But
right.
But that's an example of a question or a comment coming from an attorney. I always appreciate those, because it does help us understand the other perspective.
And by the way, while we're talking about this, we want to make sure our audience understands that when things come along, they go on the website. And so when people are looking for a particular thing, there may already be something on the website, or maybe there's something there that helps to clarify.
Yeah, on NSPS.us.com, under the resources tab at the top, if you click on that, you have a drop down with a whole slew of great resources, and one of them says standards. And if you hover over standards, it brings up several different standards that we've got, and one of them is ALTA NSPS. And if you hover over that, there are three choices. One of them is archives, and Curt, as you know, we've got every prior version, all 9 prior versions of the ALTA NSPS or ALTA ACSM standards on there. Under the ALTA NSPS standards item, you find the clean version of the standards. You find a red line version, which is the one that I use mostly in my programs, because it's really most instructive to help people understand actually what has changed from 2016 to 2021. And then we've got that snazzy PDF checkbox, table A checkbox thing that somebody sent us, which is pretty slick. But then the third choice under the ALTA NSPS standards is the FAQs. And that document is, I think it currently is dated April 6th, but we will be adding to that on a regular basis. And I tell people, before you pick up the phone or before you start typing an email to ask a question, you might go look on there, because it's not unlikely that question has already been addressed, and you can go on there. And it's not hard to maneuver through that document. We've got it in kind of in the same order that the standards are. There are some general comments up at the top, but then as you page down through, if there was an FAQ on section 2, then it'll be there, and then section 3 comes next, and section 4, section 5. So it's pretty easy to page through and find out if there's an answer to your question on a specific, section 5E Romanesque 3. If there's something there, you'll find it pretty quickly.
Yeah, that actually happened to me about a week ago. Someone had called and had a particular question, and while we were talking, I was scrolling my way through, and boom, there it was.
Yeah,
so that was great.
I really should probably add to that. There's a lot of, as you know, a lot of stuff we could put in there. We've kind of put mainly the significant things, but gosh, we could provide all kinds of guidance in there in that document. So I should spend a few hours and work on that.
I know we've talked about this before, but I think it's important for our listeners to know that NSPS is well represented, and that people rotate in and out over time. So we're always interested in hearing from people who use these standards on a regular basis, and I don't know if regular is the right word, but certainly use them enough to have a good feel for them as we go forward, looking for new committee members that either just our internal group or with the group that sits with ALTA folks, because we always need good help there. And the people that sit there now are very well informed and use the standards a lot, and that helps as we're going through the process.
Yeah, we, as you well know, you and I usually get our heads together on who we want to have on that committee, and we've been very fortunate over the years. Right now it's you and me and Judy Beal from Virginia Beach, and Todd Rackstad out of Phoenix, and Paul Byrne in Vegas, and what a great group. And they all do frequently land title surveys, and they all do different types of land title surveys, which is really helpful from the committee standpoint. In the past, we've had Craig Amy from up in Michigan, Bob Don from New England, and further back, Bob Foster in Massachusetts, and of course, Mary from also from Michigan. But we've had a variety of people on there, and it's been a pleasure. Everybody has contributed significantly to the process, and people who aren't on there anymore still come to the subcommittee meetings, where they still have direct input into the process. I think we've talked before. We have this formal committee with the joint committee with the ALTA that we have membership on, but then we have our NSPS subcommittee on the standards, and that committee meets once or twice a year in conjunction with the NSPS meetings. And sometimes people say, well, what's it take to be a member? And my response is, show up. You show up at the meeting, and you're a participant in that committee. And as we get further down the process, in the last one or two meetings, we'll have 30 people in that meeting, and early in the process we may only have 4 or 3, or one time it was just Judy and me, but it's valuable input no matter who it is or where it is. So we always appreciate the interest, and like you say, if someone has a particular interest in participating on the joint committee itself, we're interested in that. We often get quite a few people. There are a very limited number of spots on there, but it's always nice to know that there are people interested, and we can take note of who they are.
Of the comments or questions, whatever we want to call them, where we stand now, 4 months out or whatever the time frame is from when. Is there anything that struck you in particular?
Yeah, there's one thing that we did not do well, and in Section 5E in the field, and related to the in 2016 we required that utilities be located, but as you recall, and all the work we did in the last several years, we had inadvertently neglected to drag over the utility poles into Section 5. It was left dangling out there on Table A, and utility poles within 10 feet of the property. And of course, the requirement is all utility features on the property need to be located, but then utility features that are within outside but within 5 feet of the property also need to be located, except if it's a utility pole, which those need to be located if they're on the property or within 10 feet of the boundary, outside but within 10. But the sentence that we modified to do that, we didn't do well with, and it actually does not specifically say 5 feet except utility poles being 10 feet. It just says 10 feet, and that's one there that needs attention. And I don't think we need to do anything with it immediately, but that's one that we kind of blew. And I actually remember the conversation. It's like, oh, just tack that on the end, and it ends up being a little confusing.
It's like anything else. We knew exactly what we were thinking.
We did know exactly what we were thinking. I don't know what the problem is. There are a lot of good suggestions coming in. A number of them that I identified as I was, started going through these. And explaining the changes, and you look at something and somebody says, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, it means this. And then I get looking at it, and yeah, well, maybe we could have done better with that. Which is just, as you know, Curt, it's kind of funny because we've got, what have we had? 7, 8, 10 attorneys from ALTA and 5 of us very well versed on the NSPS side, in addition to the committees, in addition to my email list of 300 and some people. And still, there are things we look at, just a couple months later and say, yeah, we could have done better with that. It's at some extent it's funny, on some extent it's just kind of discouraging that all of the people looking at it, and we still didn't quite get it as good as we could have.
Yeah, I think it really goes to the realization that what we're talking about now is just part of the practice of surveying. You're never going to be able to anticipate everything. Mm. And as is evidenced by what you were just talking about, when you're trying to create something that is all encompassing and to provide as much guidance as possible, you still learn that it isn't possible to know everything, or even sometimes when it seems as logical as it is to you now, when you're having the conversation, it just doesn't come through for some reason. And
yeah.
I guess that's the frailties of being human, I suppose.
Right. And I'm looking at my list, and one of the things we talk about input, I always enjoy hearing from attorneys from that other side. And Curt, you'll remember the new item we added, which is addressing easements that do not appear in Schedule B2, but that the surveyor is aware of. And if it can't be shown that they have been extinguished, then the surveyor needs to go ahead and show it, or at least mention that fact, because it really is kind of a liability issue that we become aware of an easement, and just because it's not in Schedule B2 does not mean it's not a valid easement, because sometimes title companies will insure over an otherwise valid easement if they think the risk is low. And I did have a comment from a lender's attorney in Connecticut who said, oh, you need to remove that item. And that's my comment to surveyors. I said, lenders are not going to like this item, because they do not want to see stuff on that survey that's not in the title commitment. But they need to recognize that it's a liability issue for us to know that there's an easement and to not be showing it. I think that creates liability for us. But
yeah, it does. And I think for the most part, people understand that. But at the same time, when you're dealing with a standard that is as detailed as this one is, I think sometimes people get the idea, well, okay, I've got to live to this particular standard, and they aren't necessarily thinking outside of that, because it's not the Bible exactly, but I think people do get maybe taken off a little bit under that perspective, where in a normal circumstance it would say, oh yeah, I need to look at that. Well, but the standards didn't say I had to. So yeah. I can understand that.
Yeah, no, I understand that too, and that's why it's important to get those perspectives and to have people make those comments. One thing, Curt, that is new that you're aware of that we did not have last time we talked, and that is the HUD Multifamily information. That the background is that, of course, HUD Multifamily and the HUD Lien 232 requirements, which are like nursing home types of properties, they both reference the ALTA NSPS survey standards, but then they put, of course, put their own twist, and they have a few things that they need. In the past, let's see, in 2011, Lien 232, those people came out with their new standards reflecting the 2011 standards within a month, or within even less than that. It was stunning how quickly that happened in 2011. In 2016, it took multifamily, they got their stuff out within a couple of months, maybe I think it came out in July. effective in September. I never did see anything on the Lien 232, although I'm sure they did something eventually. This time, multifamily came out March 25th, just a month and 2 days after our new standards came out. They issued interim instructions, and their interim instructions start off saying multifamily production will accept the new 2021 ALTA NSPS survey requirements. And then they go on to give some guidance on transition time. And now these are interim. And Curt, I don't know if we've had, JB has had any luck, but we're hoping to get an audience with HUD Multifamily before they issue their final instructions, because they've required at least one or two items in their interim standards that are going to increase cost on a land title survey. And I don't know that they actually recognize what they're requiring. And so we would like to have them be able to talk with them about that. And one of the other things they did, as you know, and many people know, we eliminated the wetlands item off of Table A this time. With the idea, if somebody's interested in wetlands, they can negotiate that under Table A Item 20. Well, in fact, HUD Multifamily's very first item on their list says, yeah, we're going to negotiate wetlands under Table A Item 20. So, they obviously were reading our information and absorbing it. So that's an encouraging thing.
Yeah, it's good to have that back and forth going all the time, so we can address the issues, and it's a living document, really.
Yeah.
We kind of get hung up on absolutes in everything we do, but then as surveyors we know that there are very few absolutes in the world, and certainly sure. Routine is not necessarily a good word either, because no matter what situation you're in, you're going to find something that's unique to that particular situation. And so that's why I think it's really important to encourage people to share their information with us, ask questions, give us information about, even if it's not a question, if it's just, hey, I ran into this, and that gives us more information for the next time around.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. We love having information like that, because that may turn into eventually into a revision in the standards, or a recognition that there's something else we need to be addressing, or whatever. So it's really important that we hear from people on this stuff. What are you hearing? What was a comment that the lender's attorney made to you, and you worked through it okay, but there was some concern. We need to know all that stuff.
Right. And one other thing I wanted to chat about a little bit was during our last joint meeting. Of course, I don't know if this is new or everybody in the country already knows that you're going to step back from being the chair of that joint committee. And during our last meeting with the ALTA people, someone kind of stepped up and said they would be willing to do that. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe you could share that with people, just so they get an idea, first of all, that there'll be a new overall chair, but that doesn't mean that you're not still there.
Yeah. So there is a surveyor who works works with an entity that is actually part of First American Title, and so he's a member of the title side, but he's also I'm sure he's a member of the Oklahoma Society, and so he's a member of NSPS too. His name is Todd D'Amico, and he's been involved in the standards quite some time. He uses them every day. He's probably as tuned in with them as anybody, and he is a member of NSPS. He's a member of ALTA, so he will become the new chair. I think Kelly has us listed as co-chairs right now, probably during the transition. But I joke. The chair prior to me was Mary Fyant, who was a surveyor and owned a abstract and title company in Charlevoix, Michigan. And I think Mary, Curt, I'm not exaggerating, right? I mean, she probably retired off the committee when she was in her 90s.
Probably.
think probably 91, 92. That's not my plan. If it was, I'd be on there another 25 years. So I'm not going to do that. I've chaired it since 95, and I think that's long enough. So so Todd stepped up, said that he would chair it. I think that's a really good choice, because I think it's very important to be somebody who has a pretty strong connection to both sides. And I'll still be involved. I'll still be, hopefully able to be on the joint committee, and I certainly will be assisting Todd in any kind of transition, and continue to do programs and collect information, because it's always been a huge interest of mine since 1988. So it's stuff, as you know, there's stuff you don't just walk away from.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know we try to keep these things somewhere within a half hour or so, but I don't know if you have any parting words for our audience today in terms of outreach or anything related to the standards. Of course, as we said in the beginning, we're always available to take questions from people and try to get back some sort of answer to them as soon as possible. And that won't change, obviously.
No, yeah, a couple of outreach related things. Todd and I did a joint little seminar for ALTA a couple of weeks ago, and there were 250 some title attorneys on the call. So that was really important for us. Also, I've got a friend who's a title attorney down in North Carolina. Her name's Wendy Gibbons, and she actually used to be from Indiana. That's how I know her. We got invited to write an article for Probate and Property, which is the publication for the real estate section of the American Bar Association. So we have submitted that article, and it has been approved to be published. So we'll have an article in the national publication that, in theory, real estate attorneys would be looking at, all real estate attorneys. Now, and I think it was in 2011, Dick Bales and I actually had an article published in there. But that's been 10 years, and Wendy has some very good perspective from the title side. So it's going to be a really good article, and that'll be good outreach for probably trying to reach out to lenders and such. I also was involved in a program that Wendy had helped set up with the American College of Mortgage Attorneys. And so we did a program there. So we're really trying to get out to the attorneys and help educate them as to the changes, and encourage them to submit things and to ask questions, so that we can be as effective as we can in getting the word out and answering people's questions.
Excellent. Well, again, thanks for joining me today, and I want to make sure that you're aware of how much I personally and NSPS appreciates all the years you've put into this. Not saying you're going away, but it's been a pleasure to have you as the chair of this group and being involved so long. And it's comforting for our listeners and surveyors around the country to know that you're still around. You're not going to ride off into the sunset just yet. So
no, I'm not riding off into the sunset.
Thanks for all the effort.
Yeah, I in theory, I thought I was retiring a year and a half ago, and I'm actually not for the normal reason. People retire and they say, gosh, I'm just as busy as I was. Well, actually, what happened to me was I thought I was retiring, but I actually wasn't. And so I'm still doing everything that I was doing before I quote unquote retired. So, no use sending me a note saying, how's retirement going? Because in fact, I say sometimes I'm a rhino, RINO, retired in name only.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure, Curt, and I did get the award that I think Mark probably made for me, and that Trish sent out. I appreciate very much that recognition for the work on the committee.
Well, certainly well deserved. So we'll be talking again, obviously, as time goes on, and I'm sure we're going to have some interesting questions and comments that come in that we'll probably want to discuss in the not too distant future.
Let's hope so.
Thanks, Gary.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Curt. You take care.
Appreciate it.
Goodbye, everyone.
You've been listening to the Surveyor Says podcast, brought to you by the National Society of Professional Surveyors. If you have any questions about today's episode or any other topic, please email us at info@nsps.us.com, and we are here to help. Visit our website, nsps.us.com, to learn more about our association, the programs we administer and support, our sustaining members, and information about future episodes of Surveyor Says. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, as well as our podcast host, Podbean. And remember, it's a great day to be a surveyor.